Now, the start, as ever, is going to be vital here. There are 6 very, very good men in the first 3 rows. Ayrton Senna in pole position, Michael Schumacher next to him on the grid. Now, in Brazil, Michael Schumacher had a bad start and Senna had a good one. In the Pacific Grand Prix at the Aida circuit in Japan, it was the reverse. Michael Schumacher shot away from the start like a shell out of a gun, and Ayrton Senna got very dramatic wheel spin, as a result of which at the first corner he was hit by Mika Häkkinen. His race ended there. And behind those two, who are the rivals for the World Championship, notwithstanding the fact that Schumacher already has a 20-point lead over Ayrton Senna. And don't forget, by the way, that in the championship every point counts. There is no question of dropping points, as there used to be. Third in the grid, and the darling of the crowd today, of course, Gerhard Berger from Austria. There he is. We're looking at his car now, the V12 Ferrari, which is getting better and better. And if there's any way we'd expect it to go well, it is right here. Just behind him, on the same row of the grid, is Damon Hill, and then Leto and Nicola Larini in the second Ferrari. And don't underestimate him. He knows the circuit, he's the Ferrari test driver, and he is very good.
Because I think what's interesting here is that we've got Senna's Williams in pole, then a Benetton, then a Ferrari from Schumacher and Berger. So we've got the #1 drivers from each of these teams in the first 3 places. We then quite simply go to the #2 drivers, certainly in terms of their qualifying performance here. So it's Damon Hill in 4th place with the Williams, and then Leto's Benetton and Larini's Ferrari. So it's these 3 teams who are dominating the top 6.
2 new boys, as it were, in the first 3 rows of the grid. Nicola Larini, that I've talked about, a lot of Grand Prix experience in the past, but not recently. And JJ Leto, also a lot of Grand Prix experience in the past, but he had an accident in testing over the winter, damaged his neck. He's very sensibly taken as much time as was needed, really, to get the strength back. I had a long talk with him yesterday. He is very, very happy about his physical condition. There's been no psychological problem, which you might have expected, because he's driving in a team now where he could actually expect to win a Grand Prix, and he hasn't been in that position in the past. So now, with just seconds to go, the grid is being cleared, and we will soon see the cars going round in less than 30 seconds time now for the first lap, which is not, of course, a racing lap, it's the parade lap. And let me tell you straight away that they accelerate away from the start here very rapidly up into 6th gear. Ayrton Senna in pole position on your right, and into the Tamburello.
Yes, and away they go there. Now the bit that we're going to see first of all is what is really the main straight at Imola. They will come up, we see the grid peeling away through this 1-mile section. We shall see them flowing through a fast left-hander at Tamburello. There they go around out of the pit lane, pulling up through 190 miles an hour at this point, up to 205 miles an hour just here before they brake hard for Tosa. Back down to 2nd gear. You can see that they've gone around Tosa corner, now up the hill. Now the next corner, the corner Piratella, it's actually blind on the approach. We shall see that probably with some onboard camera footage. Over the brow, into this fast left, 4th gear, 120 miles an hour through the corner, and then blind on the exit, as you can see there, down towards this 2nd gear chicane, 60 miles an hour, the Acqua Minerale chicane with all of that writing on it. 3rd gear, around the exit of Acqua Minerale, and then up to 190 miles an hour before the Variante Alta, the second of the 4 chicanes at the Imola circuit, on this fast circuit. And there's that Variante Alta, up again to probably close to 200 miles an hour as they descend down to Rivazza. The drivers trying to keep their engines fairly cool at this stage, but having to warm up the tyres and also warm up the brakes. And that's probably the most important thing, because getting brake temperature up on a circuit which is demanding on brakes is vitally important. It's a very tense time for a driver here. He knows that the start is absolutely crucial. It's very much the calm before the storm. He's peeling round through the Rivazza, up through the fast chicane, ready to get it absolutely right to that all-critical start.
Stop press news. Michael Schumacher deliberately induced wheel spin when he got away for this parade lap. He's laid an enormous amount of rubber at the very point that he will be lining up, and that rubber will provide extra grip for when he gets away. Senna will be looking for the young German to come alongside him. The first corner is the left-hander, the Tamburello, and there's a nice long drag up to the first really slow corner by Imola standards, the Tosa, at which point, at its slowest point, they decelerate from over 200 miles an hour to just about 50 miles an hour before blasting up to 190 again. So Senna is in position, in pole position on your right. On the left is the Benetton. Behind Senna is Gerhard Berger's Ferrari. Behind Schumacher is Damon Hill. That is Martin Brundle's McLaren with a camera mounted on the rear wing. So stand by for blast off and for action from Imola. 61 laps of it. The green flag is showing. That means they're ready to go. Bruce, your rider can press the button. They'll have to stop the race, I'm sure, because there's debris on the circuit. That is Pedro Lamy. It's Pedro Lamy, who, the young Portuguese driver, who was right at the back of the grid in 22nd place, and that is one of the Benettons, so that has to be JJ Leto. And Lamy is all right. We've seen a lot of very, very badly broken motor cars, sadly, at Imola over the last 2 days, and there is absolutely not a shadow of doubt in my mind as you look at car number 6 with its left wheel ripped off. JJ Leto, I presume he's all right because he's out of the cockpit and the race will be stopped. They'll have to remove the wreckage. That will take quite a long time. And I don't know how that happened because Lamy was right at the back of the grid and JJ Leto was in 5th position.
Well, I suspect, Murray, looking at the damage to those respective cars, it looks like Leto was very, very slow, if not indeed stalled at the start. The left rear is destroyed. Let's have a look now. It looks like Lamy's hit the back of a slow Leto. There is Leto. There he is. He's stopped. He's stationary. And somebody's not going to hit him, and that's going to be Lamy. The Ligier's there going one each side. And there, just coming into our picture, is Lamy. Oh, that was very nearly an absolute rearward incident. And that's taken the complete right side off that Lotus car. And that really could have clearly had absolutely catastrophic circumstances. A wheel, looks like a wheel's gone into the crowd there, actually.
And very fortunately,
thank goodness he's all right.
Very fortunately, that area of the grandstand is empty. And everybody is blasting past me. You're looking at a replay. There is Lamy's shattered motor car. And at the end of the first lap, Ayrton Senna is leading Michael Schumacher by 0.3 of a second. Gerhard Berger is 3rd. Damon Hill is in 4th position. Here come the leaders now. It is Senna, Schumacher, Berger, Hill. They're slowing down. The pace car is out. That's it, I think. The pace car is out, going up the hill. It's not right to call it the pace car, I apologise. It's a safety car. In circumstances like this car comes out with the flashing lights on the roof. Normally, he would have a problem to pick up the leader. The ruling is that he picks up the leader and then all the others have to fall in line behind the leader with no passing allowed. We've had the safety car out very, very seldom. I can only remember it happening twice before, and never as early in a race as this. And I fear it's going to be out there for quite a long time, because to haul that Lotus, which is very badly battered indeed, and the Benetton of JJ Leto, which, as you saw, here's a replay. Now, look for Pedro Lamy cutting across from the left-hand side of your screen to the right, as out in the Sauber comes Wendlinger. You can see Leto underneath the green lights. He's stalled there. The Ligiers go past him. There's Lamy cutting across, and wham! Straight into the back of the Benetton goes the Lotus. Lamy completely unsighted.
Yes, that's just the kind of incident that Leto could do without, because apart from ruining his race, he of course is just recovering from a broken neck, and that kind of impact, which is going to be pretty hard, would undoubtedly have not done his neck any good at all. It's a great shame for Leto. He was really driving superbly in qualifying, his first time back into the seat with the Benetton after that difficult start to the season. Great shame. Maybe his unfamiliarity with the car there contributed towards the non-start that he clearly had, or maybe it was mechanical. We don't know at this stage.
We're looking back from the pace car now at Ayrton Senna, and my immediate reaction to this is this could well cause a lot of the technicians to be reconsidering their fuel strategy, because running at this slow speed, the cars which are probably only got about 70 litres in the tank will not be using nearly as much fuel, and while they're out behind the pace car, that means to say the miles per gallon will be considerably increased. There's Senna, Schumacher, Berger, Hill. Heinz-Harald Frentzen is in 5th position behind Damon Hill, and Frentzen was 7th on the grid, weaving to keep the tyre temperatures up. Behind Frentzen, who is 5th on the grid, there's the leading McLaren Peugeot of Mika Häkkinen. This is to some extent academic, because as soon as the pace car pulls off into the pit lane, and you'll know when it's going to do it, because you will see those flashing lights on the roof of the pace car go out, and he will then do a full lap with the lights out, and the lead driver, Senna, there he is, weaving the Williams Renault, will know that next time round it is go.
This is going to be equally important for these drivers, apart from keeping those tyres warm, as we can see them doing, because don't forget, these tyres need to work at about 80 or 90 degrees centigrade. That's their operating temperature. They'll be down to about 60 at the moment. To keep those brakes hot, those brakes made from carbon fibre need to work at about 500 degrees centigrade. And this kind of driving, unless the driver uses his left foot to put his left foot on the brake whilst accelerating with his right foot, that's the technique he'll need to employ to keep the heat in those brakes.
Now they're going, following the pace car now into the Variante Alta, which they approach at nearly 190 miles an hour, break down to about 75. Senna, Schumacher, Berger. From there they drop downhill, tremendously fast section, building up to 190 miles an hour to the Rivazza, which is a double left-hander, into it at about 60 miles an hour in second gear, then rapidly up into third, exit the second Rivazza. This is the first at about 100 miles an hour. Schumacher letting Senna build up a bit of a gap between the Benetton, which Schumacher is in, and the Williams Renault, which Ayrton Senna is in. Jonathan, pace cars not used when you were a Formula One driver, but from your experience, would you say that this was adding to the pressure?
I'm not sure that it's adding to the pressure. I think it actually probably helps, really, because stopping the race, which would have been the alternative a couple of years ago, really adds to the pressure for the drivers to go through the start, which is clearly one of the most dangerous parts of a whole race, is something which most drivers would rather avoid. And to go around, they can settle themselves down after all the energy and adrenaline and tension of that start. They can keep their cars in good trim. Everyone's engine is running. You know, there are some who say that Formula One Grand Prix should be started with rolling starts, like IndyCar racing, but I think for most people, the excitement of a standing start is essential to Grand Prix racing.
Well, I can tell you that they've got JJ Leto's Benetton off, and it's on the sand trap at the Traguardo, which is the left-right which leads into the start and finish straight. So now they're disposing of Pedro Lami's Lotus. And in the meantime, of course, although they're going very slowly behind the safety car, the race is on. These laps count. They are indeed on their 4th lap out of 61 now. And if you're interested, Ayrton Senna was leading Michael Schumacher by 1.8 seconds at the end of the 3rd lap.
Yes, and what this may do is change or modify slightly the fuel stop strategy which these cars are going to adopt. Here we go. Here's another view of that, Leto's car. You can see virtually everybody got by that, looking for the two Ligiers parting it. And there was the Lotus of Lamy. He was unsighted by a car ahead. I don't know what it was, something towards the back of the field. And that was in his way. It was just very fortunate for him. Here's another look at that, as we see everybody weaving at the last minute. When cars are unsighted, just as happened there that the danger was, what it does show you is how good these suspensions on the extended wishbones are at absorbing energy. If that car had gone in square on, the results would have been very, very different indeed.
And just in case you are understandably worried, I'm happy to reassure you that both JJ Leto and Pedro Lamy, who indeed we saw get out of the car and walk away, are both perfectly okay. This is the scene from Ayrton Senna's mirror. So very first camera, you're seeing his yellow helmet in the mirror as he goes into the Rivazza. That's the first of them cleared. This is the second. And there are a lot of cars with a lot of cameras on in this race, some of them on the rear wings, some of them on the fairing alongside the driver, and we've had some absolutely superb shots during practice, which I hope are replicated during the race. So, Gerhard Berger in the Scarlet Ferrari follows number 2, 3 times world champion, Ayrton Senna, who has won this race 3 times in 1988, subsequent to that 89 and 91, and that was the Minardi coming to a standstill.
Yes, that looked like Luigi Martini. I think we couldn't quite see the helmet clearly. It's either Alboreto or Martini. I suspect Martini. We don't know what his problem is, but no doubt it would have affected him either way and is not a consequence of this slow running. Of course, with regard to the strategy on pit stops, we believe that 2 stops is going to be the norm here, dividing the race into 3, and if that's the case, they'll be stopping on lap 20 of this 62-lap race. It's not impossible somebody could go for 3 stops, because the amount of time lost stopping here at Imola really is very little, because the pit lane is preceded by a tight chicane, and that means that the amount of time lost coming into the pits, and there we see that little bit of debris going across there, the amount of time lost going into the pits really is pretty small here.
And that was on the roof of the grandstand, incidentally. Shows you how high it went, as Lamy. Lotus have had a hard time in the last couple of seasons because Alessandro Zanardi, who was one of their drivers last year, had a very nasty crash at Spa. Now, the lights are out on the pace car, so it looks as though the San Marino Grand Prix is about to restart, and it will be on the 6th lap out of 61, so 1/10 distance already completed as we ride with Damon Hill looking at Gerhard Berger's Ferrari ahead as they exit the Acqua Minerale, climb up towards the Variante Alta. The Ferrari is preceded by Schumacher's Benetton, which is led by number 2, yellow helmet, blue and white, Williams Renault of Ayrton Senna. And Michele Alboreto it was who was touring, and he has gone into the pits, presumably with a repetition of whatever the problem was that made him start from the pit lane. So, coming through to complete lap 5, Senna, even if he hadn't seen those lights go out, and he certainly would have, there's nobody more astute in Grand Prix racing than him, will know from a radio message from the pits that is the situation, and that it's about to be go as far as he's concerned. Now, watch the Ferrari of Gerhard Berger, V12 engine, tremendous amount of power. He will have all the distance up to the Tosa, through the Tamburello and Villeneuve, the right-hander. And you hear the engine revs rise as Senna, followed by Schumacher. There is Berger. We're on lap 6 now, and the San Marino Grand Prix is go again, and as before, Schumacher is the chief rival to Ayrton Senna, who comes down to the Ravazza. There's Berger 3rd, Damon Hill is 4th, Fredson in the Black Sauber is 5th, Mika Häkkinen 6th, Larini 7th, and Carl Wendlinger in the 2nd Black Sauber is in 8th position. Climbing up now, I'm sorry, it wasn't the Ravazza, they're climbing up now towards the Variante Alta as they go through the Acqua Minerale, dropping down to approach it at about 150 miles an hour. And there's a gap after the 2nd Sauber of Wendlinger. Ukio Katayama in the Tyrrell is in 9th place. Martin Brundle is in 10th, so he has gained places because Martin Brundle started in 13th position on the grid.
What's really interesting here is that Schumacher is very much keeping up with Senna. Now, from the morning warm-up times, he was 2 seconds slower than Senna, and that raised speculation as to whether he was actually going to make just 1 stop and therefore race with a much heavier fuel load. If he was going to do that, that would slow him down far more than his performance here looks, and it looks that perhaps that was a Benetton smokescreen. I'm not quite sure why they were so far off in the warm-up, but he's really not losing much to Senna at all. I would say basically he's right with him.
Well, we are right with Michael Schumacher now, and Senna! My goodness! I just saw him plunge off to the right, and Senna has joined Pedro Lamy and JJ Leto in a shattered motor car. You can see the debris on the right. What on earth happened there? I don't know. Whether it was a sudden loss of downforce for some reason, but Senna is still in the car. It means to say, of course, that Schumacher has gone into the lead, but the important thing is now, how is Ayrton Senna, with the marshals already waving the yellow flags? No passing.
Yes, this looks very severe indeed, I must say. It looks like this corner that Senna was going around is absolutely flat out. It's 185 miles an hour. We really should be seeing some medical attention coming quickly here to the Williams with Senna. His head is he's very still in that car. The car has clearly gone straight on. This is a little bit like the accident that beset. He really needs help in that car. There is nobody coming to him at the moment. Yes, his head's moved. I think I just saw his head move a little bit then. The race has been stopped. The red flag is out. This looks a little bit like a problem with the car, as beset Berger at this very point 4 years ago in his Ferrari.
And it's where Nelson Piquet went off in the Williams some years ago in similar circumstances, and thank heavens he was all right. I must say I have concern at the fact that A, Senna is sitting in the car still, not moving, and B, surprisingly, there is not a lot of action. And here it is. Now look, he's going into the left-hander tremendously fast, and he runs wide and goes straight off. Doesn't even attempt to take the corner. And, well, I say that's about 190 miles an hour at that point, the exit from the Tamburello. They're still building up speed, but it was not very far short of 200 miles an hour. You can see the debris pouring off the car as Gerhard Berger comes through in the Ferrari.
Yes, there was
and already now the medical assistance is there. And so I'm glad to be able to tell you that medical assistance is now with Ayrton Senna, and they're taking off his helmet to get him out of the Williams Renault. At a San Marino Grand Prix meeting which has been dogged with the most appalling circumstances. First of all, Rubens Barrichello goes off on Friday at about 150 miles an hour and was extremely lucky that he wasn't very badly hurt. Then we had the even worse, dreadful accident for Roland Ratzenberger yesterday, and now this on the 7th lap of the race.
Yes, it's really very difficult indeed to know what happened there. The little bit of footage that we saw as Senna left the track, he just appeared to go straight on, appeared not to make the corner. This is a corner which normally should be flat out at 185 miles an hour without the car being on the limiter grip.
Michael Schumacher has stopped and got out of his car, helmet off, grim-faced. And all is quiet at the Imola circuit. The crowd has been stunned into silence. Senna, an enormously popular man here, 3 times a winner here in the past, and a very likely winner seemingly when this race began.
This is always a very difficult time, of course, for the other drivers in the field. I can remember back when Gerhard Berger.
Mika Häkkinen, the race is stopped after 6 laps because of a frantic accident with Ayrton Senna. It's the 3rd big accident, as John said, during this Grand Prix weekend with Formula 1 cars. And there we have a look into the Williams garage, and they are very anxious to know what happened with their car. And I think, John, also Damon Hill would really like to know what happened here.
Well, we've seen 3, absolutely awful accidents this weekend. We've also seen a lot of cars spinning throughout the weekend. Now, in the case of Rubens Barrichello, Rubens accepted responsibility for his accident. We don't know yet what was the cause of the tragic accident for Roland Ratzenberger, and equally now with Ayrton Senna. The car had just entered the corner, was coming up to close to apex and then onto the exit, and the car just failed to take it. In fact, from the backward view that I saw, it appeared to me that the car just suddenly started to veer to the right, and the man that really would have had the best sight of it would have been Michael Schumacher, who was probably only 5 or 6 car lengths behind.
John, I can't remember a Grand Prix where we had so many stoppages as this weekend, to be honest. Well, again, we're looking into the Williams garage. There's the spare car, which is not being used for this race, and there again the scene of the accident. A lot of medical people in attendance. Sid Watkins very close to Ayrton Senna, probably talking to him. And let's just wait and see what's happened, or this is going to take a long time to restart, so I don't know what Perez wants to be doing, but there's not a lot of things happening here for the next God knows how many minutes. There's the Williams mechanics. Well, that must be dreadful, John.
Well, in fact, we've seen the helicopter, I think, is coming in. The medical helicopter has landed now on the circuit, and Ayrton Senna is going to be transferred, I think, directly to hospital in Bologna rather than taking him to the medical centre at the circuit. So obviously this incident is a serious one, and the judgment by Professor Watkins and the medical team here at the San Marino circuit is that is the best steps to take. And again, looking into the Williams pits, it's always a very difficult moment for a team when they've had an incident like this on and around the circuit. So the team working away, and very quickly he'll be transferred into the ambulance that's waiting, then taken to the helicopter and taken to the safety of Bologna to the hospital there.
Well, Keke Rosberg just walked in to tell us that with JJ Leto everything is okay. So that is some positive news, and we're awaiting news, I should say, on what happened to Ayrton Senna's car, if we can find that out, and what's happened to Ayrton Senna himself.
Well, the helicopter we see there on the circuit waiting, and the various forms of stretcher that they use, and now there's a saline drip has been applied. That's just to act as a stabilizer. So work being carried out by the side of the track by the medical team at Imola, and this is a part of the circuit where, in fact, on a number of occasions we've seen very severe, spectacular accidents. Way back, I think in '87, Nelson Piquet, when he was driving for the Williams team, went off and hit the wall. Gerhard Berger did it, Michele Alboreto did it. So it is a part of the circuit which is tremendous from a driver's point of view, but of course at the very, very high speeds that Grand Prix cars are capable of, plus the amount of downforce and grip that a car does generate. Now, if something goes wrong in the corner where you've got that very high speed with a very high load, and for some reason that load disappears quickly, then that's when a driver does have a big problem.
John, we talked about this all yesterday with Dave Price, and again we see the survival cell of that car being absolutely intact.
Yes, indeed, and the car has done its job superbly. An impact of that speed, I mean, the figures, I don't even know, I wouldn't even want to guess the kind of G-force that initial impact would have generated, but it would have been extremely high, believe me. But of course, the part of a driver that appears to become much, much more vulnerable, and has certainly been the case this year, is the area around the neck, and that's the area I'm sure that everybody is very concerned about at this present time. Now, Eddie Irvine, you were doing a test with the Jordan team earlier in the season at Manicourt, and you went backwards at pretty high speed into a wall. You got a bit of a whiplash, but you didn't have any really severe injury that prevented you from getting back into the car.
No, I was very lucky because I'm quite tall, so my back was the whole way along the back of the monocoque, and my head was actually touching the monocoque, so there was no way of whiplash or anything like that. But some of the guys, they aren't quite as tall, and they sit a bit further forward in the car, so when the car goes in backwards, it's a big problem for them, because they don't really, their head's going to move a bit, and that bit can be quite important.
John, this is ridiculous. I mean, how can that LaRousse get out of the pits when there's a red flag?
Well, I'm gobsmacked. I think that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen at any time in my life that a Grand Prix car is allowed, when the course is under a red, everybody is stopped on the pit lane, and Comas in the Larus has driven out, and he drove out. We heard him leaving the pits at pretty much full speed, and he came around Tamburello corner. I mean, this is the most bizarre weekend at a Grand Prix I can remember. I mean, that is, I don't want to make any more comment because I'm sure I'll say something that's incorrect.
Ayrton Senna, I think, pretty much being transferred straight into the helicopter and then off to hospital in Bologna, where he will be checked over, and all the work that needs to be done on him has to be done. And they've taken his overalls off, and they're trying to probably be as careful as they can. John, even if they in the slightest possible way suspect any neck damage, they are oh so careful with you, aren't they?
Yes, indeed. It's a very vulnerable part of the human body, and of course, in just withdrawing a driver from the cockpit of a car, that in itself has got to be done extremely carefully. And it often is the case where, when in an incident, and when marshals arrive in their desire to help a driver as quickly as possible, in fact, it's better not to do anything until the specialists arrive. The simple task of removing a helmet in itself is not necessarily a simple task. Of course, all the marshals are equipped with knives to cut through the strap that retains the helmet, but it is something that needs to be done with great knowledge and care to ensure that if there is an injury to the spine or to the neck, that there isn't any residual injury in addition.
Well, if we look at the right front corner, John, is completely taken off the car. I don't think Ayrton got hit by something like a wheel, which apparently was the case in Roland's accident.
I think, again, it's only speculative. We don't know enough. We haven't seen from the camera angles precisely, first of all, what caused the car to go off the circuit, and secondly, the camera view from looking up to Tamburello, the car actually was out of sight. But one thing is for sure, that with the construction of these current cars, while the driver in the safety cell is kept very safe, if you take off the wheels and suspension in that corner, it is possible, in a very severe impact, for the wheel to come into contact with the driver's head, or the wall, in fact, to come into contact. So we don't know, and it is very, very speculative indeed to consider what may or may not have been the question. So we're sitting here looking at something which is indeed very serious, and it is not right for us to speculate on the extent of the injuries to Senna, or in fact what was the cause of the accident in the first place.
There's in the case of this accident and the case of Ratzenberger's and Barrichello's accident, John, I think I found it remarkable, and that neither of the three cars we've seen having an accident, also with JJ and Pedro, which, I mean, those cars were torn apart basically, none of them caught fire.
Again, part of the safety cell that the fuel tank is in is an extremely strong cell, again, because of development over many, many years, and a history of a car crashing. It nearly always caught fire. Well, now we see Senna is being transferred to the medical helicopter, and this is going to be, I think, a flight straight to Bologna, to the hospital. And of course, he's received a great deal of attention from the medical team here, the doctors, from Professor Watkins. And we see Professor Watkins walking with Senna as he's being transferred now to be flown immediately to Bologna.
Well, John, we're all speculating about the accident. Could there be any possibility that the drivers say enough's enough?
I think that, again, is an area where I don't want to get into. It is a Grand Prix, and there are many factors involved in Grand Prix racing. I think certainly after the weekend that we have seen so far this weekend, it's going to be difficult for a number of people. The desire, the heart, the spirit to drive may have waned considerably. Well, very shortly, Ayrton Senna is going to be leaving the Imola circuit and taken very quickly indeed. Bologna is some 30 kilometers from the Imola racetrack, and there will be a medical team waiting for him as soon as that helicopter lands at the hospital.
With Ayrton Senna being taken away in the helicopter, I think there we watch Mika Häkkinen. Well, there was a smile on his face just before this race, but there's not much of a smile at the moment. Thumbs up for the helicopter pilot. He can take off and will go full speed to the Maggiore Hospital in Bologna. The accident occurred on lap 6 out of 61. The car on what is now full fuel load at the start of the race, but I don't know how many litres, probably about 60 litres of fuel, John?
I would think that Williams were probably running around 70 litres, maybe a little bit. Here we see from Schumacher. Now there's the camera view. Suddenly Senna's car, there's marks on the ground, but that's where cars have been bottoming. And the car just, a little after the apex, just began to turn right. No chance whatsoever for Senna to do anything about recovery. Again, the right front and right rear of the car taking a massive impact, but again, it's the front of the car that is the danger zone for the driver, because with that wheel being compressed. Now here is the view. This is from Damon Hill as he came round in the sister car to Senna, and you can see the initial impact from the dust and then the debris, and that's the distance that Senna's car travelled before finally, again, probably something like 200 meters or more across the road. Bodywork, bits of suspension, of course lots of dust and general debris, and a pretty appalling sight for Damon Hill to be faced with.
There we see the helicopter shot of, well, back to Michael Schumacher in replay, and well, it just didn't turn left anymore, John, halfway through the corner.
Just through the corner, the car had left-hand locked down to go through a left-hand corner, and then just after that dark patch in the road, you can see the cars have been bottoming, and in fact Senna's car, we noticed in qualifying, was bottoming through that. But there's nothing obvious that I can say indicates went wrong. It just appears that suddenly, instead of continuing the path to the left, the car began to straighten up and headed for the outside of the circuit. At this point now, something has gone wrong. You can't see the picture. It needs an enhancement to...
Good evening. If you've tuned in tonight expecting the outstanding race that the San Marino Grand Prix here at Imola promised to be, then I'm sorry, that's not the programme we have for you. Instead, the sport of Formula One tonight is in deep mourning. Yesterday we had the loss of Roland Ratzenberger, the first Formula One racing fatality for 12 years. And today we've lost, arguably, the greatest talent of his generation. After a high-speed crash at Tamburello, Ayrton Senna is dead. Like Ratzenberger yesterday and Barrichello on Friday, it was a violent accident and its cause remains a mystery. There was enormous shock around the circuit, but for a while there was hope. Senna was seen to move. He required a great deal of attention at the crash site and was then taken by helicopter to Maggiore Hospital in Bologna and straight into intensive care. And when the first bulletins were issued, the hope started to fade. Senna had grave head injuries, was in a coma for a while. His heart stopped beating. He was revived, but at 6:30 local time came the news that Senna was clinically dead. The last hope was gone. A great star was lost. The San Marino Grand Prix weekend had begun with the dramatic accident that Rubens Barrichello miraculously survived, with only minor injuries. But the next day, the miracles ran out, and Roland Ratzenberger, in only his second Grand Prix, became the first race-meeting fatality that Formula One had suffered in 12 years. The next was tragically barely 24 hours away. And race day today had other potential tragedies. At the start, Pedro Lamy in the Lotus failed to avoid a stalled J.J. Leto. A tyre flew into the crowd, injuring 8 spectators, none seriously. Both drivers were unhurt. Later in the afternoon, a tyre and bodywork flew off Michele Alboretto's Minardi as it sped out of the pit lane. 4 mechanics, 2 from Ferrari, 2 from Lotus, needed hospital treatment. So it's been a dreadful day, and the loss of Ayrton Senna is really tough to comprehend. He qualified yesterday with his 65th pole position of his career. If he'd gone on to take the victory that everyone predicted, it would have been his 42nd in Grand Prix motor racing. He was 3 times a winner here at San Marino. He was 3 times a world champion. Here's the thoughts of our commentary team. Murray Walker, an overwhelming sense of sadness here today. What kind of talent, what kind of star has the sport lost today?
Well, I can still hardly comprehend that it's happened, Steve. I remember Ayrton Senna, and it seems terrible to have to use those words, as a tremendously intense man who was determined to achieve his goals. He came here as an unknown Brazilian who couldn't speak English. He came to a cold climate. He lived a long way away from home, and he applied himself 1000% to his craft. He succeeded in all the categories that he was in until he got to Formula One. He very nearly won a Grand Prix in his first year. He then went on to become a 3 times world champion. And as far as I'm concerned, and I do see all of them, he was a man who was always courteous, always considerate, always helpful, and he was a man of his word. If you wanted to talk to him, he would say, yes, come and see me after qualifying, and you might have to wait a long time, but you always got him. On top of that, he was a tremendously successful businessman. He was much loved by his family and all his friends around him. And it is a truly dreadful, dreadful blow to motorsport.
You've seen most of the great Grand Prix drivers there have been. Where would you place Ayrton Senna among those?
Oh, I would unhesitatingly place him in the top 3. I think I would place him with Nuvolari and with Jim Clark, and I would put Sterling Moss in the same bracket. But you can't speak about many drivers in the same breath as you can Ayrton Senna.
How does the sport now handle a loss, if it can? Formula One has an image problem now?
Well, what I'm going to say, Steve, may sound callous, and I don't mean it to, but Grand Prix racing, motor racing, is an extremely dangerous sport. It always has been, it always will be. It's in the nature of the sport. The drivers who take part in it know that something like this, in their heart of hearts, could happen to them. They wouldn't do it if they knew it was going to happen to them, but they accept the risks because the passion is worth the risk, and that's what they want to do, and I don't think anything ought to be done to stop them. It's happened in the past, it will happen again. All I can say is that it has happened on this occasion to a truly great man, and although it's a cliche, he will be desperately, desperately missed, and Formula One is going to be stunned for the whole of the rest of this season.
Jonathan Palmer, amid all the great sadness, the sport has to ask itself, why have there been 2 fatalities in just 2 days? There must be a reason.
That's certainly a logical question, but I can't help thinking that it is the most tragic of coincidence overall. I think it's important to recognize that, from what we know, neither of these 2 accidents had anything to do with drivers wrestling with their cars, trying to overdrive it and losing control purely through trying to go quickly. I think in both situations, in both circumstances, something has broken, possibly with the car, possibly some debris on the circuit, possibly a tyre. There has been some outside influence rendering the driver no chance of controlling the vehicle, and with the very high speeds that we see here at Imola, plus the fact that those high speeds are seen on swerving parts of the circuit, the car will almost certainly go off the road and hit the concrete walls on either side.
But we talked before the race, with the change in regulations, there are new and greater demands on drivers this year.
Yes, there are. We've seen changes in regulations removing active suspension, which only had 1 year of prevalence in Formula One after all. You know, we've been using the sorts of suspension that we have now for decades in the past. So non-active suspension is not new. And indeed, nor is getting rid of traction control. Traction control is undoubtedly an aid to safety, in the same way that ABS braking is an aid to safety under braking. But of course, it does remove driver influence, and it's always been very important to Formula One to have the driver being in as much control of the car as possible, and his skills influencing the car's performance. But again, those kind of changes, particularly removing traction control, sure has meant the cars have been harder to drive, but really at the slower parts of the circuit, it's easier to spin the cars. But once again, I emphasize that these two incidents had nothing to do with drivers losing control of their vehicles while pushing them to the limit. In both circumstances, the cars left the road when they should have been capable of rounding the corners without any problem whatsoever, well within the limits of both the drivers and the cars. Something went wrong in both occasions.
You raced against Ayrton Senna. What a great talent the sport has lost today.
It's absolutely devastating. I think everybody is totally numb about the thing. To my mind, he was the best driver Grand Prix racing had ever seen. Different people have different views, but I think the guy was quite exceptional and is a dreadful loss to the world of motorsport.
There'll be more on a great racing driver in a special tribute program at 2:20 on Wednesday afternoon, BBC Two. We had a race today, a two-part race in which Michael Schumacher made it 3 wins out of 3 for Benetton. Nicola Larini added some joy to the day with second place for Ferrari, Hakkinen third for McLaren, with Damon Hill completing the top 6. Schumacher now dominates the World Championship with maximum points from the first 3 rounds. The next round, in Monaco in 2 weeks' time, takes place without one of Monaco's most famous residents, Ayrton Senna. As a result, there was no champagne on the podium after the race this afternoon. There really was nothing to celebrate, even for Michael Schumacher.
Just win the race, but I can't feel satisfied, can't feel happy. I mean, what happened this weekend, never have seen something like this. Not just one thing, so many things. The only thing I can say about this is I hope we learn from this. I think there is a lot to learn from, and we have to use this, and things like this, they shouldn't happen without taking the experience from it. It's the only thing I want to say and I can say.
I've known Ayrton Senna and had the genuine pleasure of interviewing Ayrton Senna ever since his early days in Formula Ford and Formula 3 back in the early 80s. And to my mind, he was one of the most talented, motivated, focused and lucid sportsmen that I've ever come across. Formula One this evening is mourning the loss of not one but 2 drivers, Roland Ratzenberger and Ayrton Senna.